Album number 3. Who gets it? Josh or Matt?
It's me, DJ Shadow, with Introducing. In the opening montage, you heard Building Steam with a Grain of Salt, and now you're going to hear Midnight in a Perfect World. Okay, Matt.
They don't really roll off the tongue, do they? They don't really no lyrics kind of do that, you know. So.
We are an amateur podcast, so these things are charming, not flaws.
Audience won't know. I'm going to cut it all out.
No, leave it. It's all good.
All right, Matt, what are the stats on this album?
Introducing by DJ Shadow comes in at number 32 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums. Number 3 in 1996. Number 151 of all time. It's DJ Shadow's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It's the only record we're covering tonight that made Rolling Stone's list, coming in at number 329. And DJ Shadow was ranked, 204 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
I keep wanting to say it like DJ Shadow, like DJ Khaled. And that is Introducing, END, not Introducing, for those of you looking it up when you listen. This album was released September 16th, 1996. DJ Shadow was born Joshua Paul Davis in 1972 in San Jose, California. This is his debut album, and he has 7 studio albums. He has had many mixes and remixes before this album, but this is his first full-length debut. This album is comprised entirely of...
I would imagine it's his first debut, Josh.
His first full-length debut. Sorry. This album is comprised entirely of samples from vinyl records. Genres include hip-hop, trip-hop, electronic, and experimental mashup of all of those. Influences, he has said Steinsky, Prince Paul, and Curtis Mantronic were all influences on him. They were all like DJs and like influential kind of DJs. Similar artists: RJD2, Danger Mouse, DJ Premier, Dr. Octagon, Massive Attack, and Thievery Corporation. His 2002 album, The Private Press, reached 44 on the Billboard 200. No Hot 100 singles. Some fun facts about him: he started out as a DJ on the UC Davis college radio station, KDVS. So that's University of California, Davis. The only pieces of equipment used to make this were an AI MPC 60 drum machine, a pair of turntables, and Pro Tools. Early Pro Tools, I would imagine, from 96. He started producing this album in 1994 in his apartment. And this album was more popular in the UK to start. It kind of rose in the charts there, and it was kind of it was a slow grower in the US here, eventually kind of by word of mouth and slow album sales. I mean, this type of album was always kind of unique. It wouldn't be a hit right out of the gate, I would imagine, but it has become very influential. The Guinness Book of World Records cited this album as the first album created entirely from samples, so it's got the world record there. Introducing inspired Radiohead to edit and loop drums on OK Computer, so influential on Radiohead. And DJ Shadow has a personal collection of more than 60,000 records, so he's a real kind of record store, hanging out in the record store looking for records, digging in the crates, CTS person.
Combing the stacks, if you will.
Right. Exactly. So
he was our first fan.
Yeah, he was. He's sampling us as we speak. Okay, that's all I got for DJ Shadow. So Introducing, I know we alluded to this. It was all of an album that we knew but didn't listen to at the end of the last show. So let's start with Matt this week. What did you think of Introducing?
Well, I also have to say, I'm looking here. There's a couple other genres. It says new ones, plunderphonics. Okay. Did you see that one, Josh? Plunderphonics.
I did not see that, no.
And sampledelia.
Okay.
And both of them basically look like...
Sampledelia makes sense, because it's like psychedelia, but with samples, right?
But it looks like plunderphonics
yeah.
is a music genre in which tracks are constructed by sampling recognizable musical works. The term was coined by composer John Oswald in 1985 in his essay "Plunderphonics or Audio Piracy as a Compositional Prerogative."
Okay.
I enjoy all music has one of the terms most of them are pretty obvious, but the last one is left field rap is one of the genre that it's in. Okay. And left field rap straddles the line between rap and electronica. It's a producer style rather than an MC's. So there you go. That's left field rap.
So I was somewhat familiar with this record.
Okay.
My buddy from high school actually brought this home from college because he got very much into like electronic music, DJ, like hip hop and stuff like that. He actually got turntables. It's the first time he actually could scratch too, and it was where
nice.
Really like. And I tried it out. Like, spoiler alert, it's really freaking hard. Like when as soon as he brought them over and like showed me like how they actually do it, I was like, all right, I have a totally new appreciation for just any DJ really, because it's amazing that you said he's got like what 6,000 albums,
60,000.
I'm sorry, 60,000 albums, right? And it's also apropos that this is the cover of the record of the album, the guy's just going through the stacks, right? But the ability to be able to put together, like to know in your mind, like this part of this song would go well with that part of this song over here, and to get those insane records out and to put them, and then to cue it up just for that right part, and then play it, especially if you're doing it live or whatever. It's unbelievable. It's a whole nother way of doing music, and it's I don't think it gets nearly enough appreciation, at least in the mainstream, for how difficult this, because it seems like it's just you got to be a savant, right, to be your brain just work in this like genius way to be able to know how to put everything here. So I knew that I knew this album. I knew certain parts of it. I always love the way it starts with building steam with a grain of salt. There's something about that piano part with the beat and the chorus on top of it, this kind of eerie, kind of like this minor key. It's like this dramatic, kind of opening is it's just really, really cool. And it just goes from there, right? And it takes you in a variety of different, kind of listening experiences. Some are kind of like that, where it's kind of this eerie thing. Some are more, more mellow and laid back. This to me is definitely a night album. This is a great album to listen to just kind of at night when you're just open to experiencing all kinds of moods and sounds and taking you in different directions. It's pretty chill for the most part, even though there might be some parts that kind of come out a little heavier, a little bit more raucous, but it still is very it's very lined well with, kind of just wanting to kind of put music on at night, whether it's on in the background or whether you want to just put headphones on and just kind of have an experience. Either way, I think works great. There's some jazz elements here. There's some, but lots of beats, like trip hop is something that kind of came up. And that's one thing Sherry was asking me, like, what would you call this type of genre? I'm like, I don't know. That's of course before I knew there was such a thing as plunderphonics, right? I should have said it's clearly plunderphonics, right? Or sampledelia.
God damn, Matt, we're gonna lose our cred now.
I know, right? So I was like, I don't know. That's a good question, because my first inclination was to say, well, it's electronic, right? Because it's a DJ and he's taking different samples, and it's like electronic kind of samples. So in that sense, I was kind of coming in here thinking, well, this is my favorite electronic album that we've covered. We kind of did,
right.
We did Aphex Twin, right? We did Octure. I know we've done a couple of other ones, but this one...
Are we talking 90s electronic, or are we going all the way back to like 70s stuff?
Any of them. I mean, if you want to put that, I would put this up against it. My thing was going to be like, this is my... if we're going to say that this falls in line with those categories, which I'm not sure that it does, actually, because this is sampling. I think, certainly...
do you consider like Nine Inch Nails electronic?
No, not like this. No, I was thinking more like Oval? Yeah, Oval. That's what. Yeah, I was kind of going more there because there's no lyrics, right? No vocals, right?
Yes, it's all instrumental.
It's instrumental. But this, I don't think I would, because I mean, those guys are kind of like, they're actually kind of creating the sounds and putting them together, right? And like, what didn't we do that one band that did Glitch, like the Glitch band? Was that Oval? I don't know.
Yeah,
but
that was Oval.
Okay, that wasn't really for me. But like, a DJ who's using sounds and putting them together without any vocals or anything like that. If that's like an umbrella, a huge umbrella that we could put all this stuff into, this is the one that I responded to the most. I thought that this, and maybe the reason for that is it's got more traditional instrumentation, right? Because it's clearly taken from previous works. And I don't know, man. I don't know how this falls in line with like Paul's Boutique, right? That's an album that we've always said, well, you can't make a Paul's Boutique anymore. Because just the lawsuits would be ridiculous, and I don't know, like.
Well, you do it by like picking obscure vinyl where there's no one around,
and maybe that's what you do. You don't pull from the Beatles, right? Like they did at Paul's Boutique. You pull from like some of these things that like nobody's ever heard of, and you're in your collection of 60,000 records, which includes some German import from 1972 that nobody's heard of. So yeah, maybe that's the sauce, but.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say the sampling is different if we're comparing Paul's Boutique to this album. Like they're taking like entire snippets of like a song or something. And like you said, this is much more like built from the ground up and chopped up. It's not recognizable in the same way that the sampling from Paul's
But do you know that? Is that true? Because I don't know. I know that this is all sampled, but I can't tell you how much was taken from one part versus another. And if you are sampling more obscure stuff, how are you going to be able to know how much was taken from a certain song or not? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm just saying I didn't see anything about there being lawsuits, for this album. So I'm guessing that it's much more minimal in terms of like what it's taking.
Okay.
Or I don't know. I'm just trying to think because I thought of Paul's Boutique also. So I was trying to think about why this just feels different in some way compared to that album.
And it's also
building on that.
And it's also different than someone like Girl Talk, because Girl Talk clearly is taking like top 40 hits and putting them together, right? So I don't know. I guess it's all interesting, but as far as this record goes, I love this. I thought it was great from start to finish. I think that every part kind of like moved me in one way or another. I was never bored of this record. This is a 63-minute long album, and there's some tracks on here that are much longer. You've got like a 640, 750, 9. The last couple songs are pretty long, right? 9 minutes, 7 minutes, and then there's a couple songs here that are like 2 minutes. Organ Donor should be a longer song. That's such a great like organ kind of part that's going on there. I'm like, that should carry on longer. That should be more than 2 minutes. But I really like this record. I remembered more of it. I will say this. I was more familiar with this record than I thought that I was, because when I listened to it the first time, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with most of this. So it's been a while since I've listened to it, but really liked listening to it this week. Guy's mad talented. And I think he did excellent, top choice of the samples that he took, and I think that they blended really well together for a very cool sounding record. And I'm pretty big on it, so thumbs up from me.
Yeah, I kind of always describe this. This is what I always hear about, but I haven't like fully sat down to listen to it. But knowing going into it, I knew I was going to like this album just because of what it is. Once again, kind of inexplicable as to why I just never sat down and listened to it. I think because there was a lot that was familiar to me about this album, like pieces of this were played to me. So it's kind of funny. Like I almost was introduced to this album in the way that this song is, right? In snippets along the way, and then this cohered it together. This album feels to me like there's a relatively famous record store near where I grew up called the Princeton Record Exchange. The guys from LCD Sound System will talk about what a great record store it is. I recommend it if you're ever in Princeton, New Jersey. But there's always a couple guys in Princeton Record Exchange who are like in the back of the obscure area, right? And they have headphones on, and it looks like they're in like a celestial place that's there. And I love music, but like I think they love music more than I can ever love music as much as I love this place, and it's like a little slice of heaven. And those are the ones that I just call like the heads, right? Like they are listening to not just albums or artists, they are listening to like sounds and ideas, right, of music. They're the type of people that do have 60,000 albums because they'll listen to like 3,000 and then somehow they'll connect 5 of them together into their own map, right? Which I love because I do that with other things, but certainly not with that level of sophistication. So I like to think that I have that skill at times, but that's just another level of like audiophile almost. And that's a little bit what it is. So in that sense, it's kind of a different way of doing what we've seen. And you guys leaned into the electronic end of things and hip hop, right? Both of them are big pieces of this. Certainly you could probably call this a trip hop album, honestly. It's got enough of that connective tissue that I don't think you'd be wrong in labeling this primarily a trip hop album. What immediately came out to me was how ambient this album is. It shares a lot in common with things that like Brian Eno does. It even shares a lot in common with those albums we would cover from the late 70s and early 80s, where we'd laugh and kind of go like, I'm not even sure at times this is music. You know what I mean? Like it feels almost like an experiment in sound. Now this is a much more inviting version of that because it's always underpinned by some sort of rhythm or melody that's there. But I do think of it as like an exploration of sound in the way that I think anybody who does lots of samples is to some degree exploring the texture of sound, right? It's just that unlike what is that one group the Residents, right?
I was just thinking
Eskimo, where it was so stripped down that it was like Captain Beefheart, Trout Mask Replica's a different one, but yeah, that and those, it's not that because there's musicality to it, but it's not too far from some of the stuff that Brian Eno did in terms of exploring concepts, right? Also, it's not too far from like what the KLF did in that album we covered that was designed to sort of be like a drive at night. And so it was part vibes, but also there was definitely some, cut in samples with that. So I saw a lot of lineage in those types of albums as well. So I would describe it. You said, what is this, Matt? I would say it's an electronic album with trip hop and hip hop elements. That's also an exploration of sound and at times can be ambient. Because one person's chill is another person's ambient. This is a great driving album. I listened to this multiple times this week, but one of the times I did was when I was on like a night drive. I had to do 30 minutes of driving at night one time, and boy, this is a great album when you're driving at night. Instead of getting, sped up in your thoughts, it's kind of a great way to just, just do a task that's mundane but also connected. And that's why I think, Matt, it's like at 63 minutes it doesn't feel as long as the normal 63 minute album because there's a meditative quality to it that you can really sink into this album quite a bit. We all know that to be able to do this there's a genius level quality to like taking sounds and piecing them together. It always amazes me because kind of what we do is we try ourselves to piece together artists in like what's familiar to us and what's not familiar to us. So I'm like, imagine trying to do that thing, which is relatively simple, but then be like, okay, and what I'm going to do now is just take small bits of sound from all of those people and make a soundscape out of it. It's really remarkable. Do you think there was a lot of this in the 90s, right? And like bands that, you could see in experimental art rock bands after this, the lineage, but I feel there isn't a lot of this spirit of what music is in music of the last 15 years. I think music has become a lot more, and this is not like a music today is bad or music back then was better. So let me start by clarifying that. But I do feel that music nowadays gets much more to the point, and I don't know whether it's the audience or music. It doesn't feel as subtle as this anymore. Am I wrong to feel that this doesn't in the moment seem like it has as many sons and daughters as it did in the late 90s and early 2000s when I heard lots of stuff that spun off of this?
Well, I don't know if I don't really listen to much modern music, but like this, I don't think this type of sound is in like top 40 music. I mean,
no,
probably
it never,
still like experimental or ambient like in today's music. I'm sure this is still influential in that way, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I hear it. I mean, I think this is definitely influential in the hip hop community a lot in terms of creating beats and creating music for rappers to rap over.
Do you hear this type of beat in modern hip hop though? Like I heard this type of beat a ton in the late 90s and early 2000s, right? Like there was lots of stuff that had elements of what this was doing, but there's a subtlety to this, and that's where I keep going back to the ambient nature of this. Even quieter music nowadays there is much less subtlety to what's being done than what this is. I feel there's almost like a craftsmanship to this that I kind of almost consider this the equivalent of like a master cobbler or a master, someone who works with their hands, right? And is able to like from the ground up build like art or construction, right? Like, an artist element of it. This is just sort of the hip hop version of, constructing from the ground up. And I just, one thing that just stood out to me is you just don't seem, and it may still be creative, but like I could find stuff that was underground much easier in another era, or I could find stuff that there were commercially successful bands that took elements from what this was. And you mentioned one, like Radiohead, right? Like absolutely took elements of this, and you could get to Radiohead very quickly, right? By being in the relatively mainstream. Like, you know what I mean? You could find Radiohead without having to be searching super hard, right? As long as you were, in mainstream rock music. And I'd be interested to see how this manifests itself now, because it's both influential, but I feel it's an orphan in the last 15 years as well. And that was when I was thinking about this, I was like, wow, there just isn't a lot that sounds like this. And there aren't a lot of people doing what this is doing. It's like a very academic take on electronic and hip hop music, which I love. And it just sounds great. It's just, it really, it's evocative in so many ways. And it's a reminder to me that something can be complicated while also having a simple sound. And I love stuff like that, right? I love something that's inherently complicated and ridiculously hard to make, but also sounds as if there's a simplicity to it. That's an incredible art to be able to do those two things at the same time. So I'm babbling a little bit. This is a easy thumbs up for me. Great album, high re-listenability for me. And certainly I think not only, what I will say about this, not only is this an album that I will revisit, but it's the type of album that if I have friends who I know have some ambition in their musical tastes, it's the type of album that I would recommend to them if they're not familiar with it, which is like the highest level of compliment for me to an album.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I am really pleased listening to this album. It was quite a discovery. I immediately responded to it. I think we've talked about a lot of genres this week, and Matt, you said it is a perfect night album. I would agree with that. I do think it is electronic and ambient and trip hop, like all of those things. And I think I responded to this album almost in the same way I did with the Massive Attack album, just like immediately locked in and enjoyed what it was doing. I enjoy how layered it is, without feeling like too obscure or complicated, or kind of it's very inviting in a way that this type of music often is not, especially electronic music. There can be a barrier. I found it just kind of, for it being all like a collage of things, it feels so, he makes it seem so natural. And like I want to echo your sentiments, both of you, about like the ability to like edit this stuff together, to have an editing brain to like cobble things together like this from different things is just kind of extraordinary. And it seems so natural, like when listening to this album, that these things are all ostensibly from different, who knows how many different albums for one song, but it just comes together so great. I do feel like this is a great chill out album, but there's also a variety in the songs. You know, they vary in tempos, they vary in what's kind of the dominant theme of the song. Like I really, like you said, the songs I picked for the montage and the opening, I just like the kind of the piano, and I don't know, there's like a real like emotional feeling that I get from listening to some of these songs on the album. I do see the inspiration for like hip hop. This is like so kind of not influential, but also feels foundational to like where hip hop can go, or kind of like an evolution of the sound that it takes. You know, I'm still mulling over, John, what you're saying about like modern music and like how this is used, or how it's absent from today. I don't know, like one way or another about that. I'll have to think about that more, but I just, and any album that ends with a Twin Peaks quote is going to be a real winner in my book. So, this is just a real pleasant surprise. It's hard to describe. It's something that I feel like on some level, like anybody can listen to and get something out of too. It's not so avant-garde or obscure or challenging that you can't enjoy it. I think that's also what I really like about like the best trip hop and electronic music, is that it can be so accessible.
And a lot of the followed by that I'm looking for at All Music right now is acts from the mid to late 2000s and the early 2010s. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of bands we're going to be covering later, like the Avalanches and Fortet and Boards of Canada, right? And Kid Koala, right? Those are all groups we're going to cover later. But notably, a lot of them stop around the mid 2010s. Yeah. So I'll keep looking a little bit more to see, you know, who those bands might have influenced, to see where the lineage goes. So, but yeah.
This is a, you know, borderline elite album for me. It's a real, not knowing anything about DJ Shadow just by name or any of his other work, for example, or, you know, I don't even know like how prolific he is. I mean, he has multiple studio albums, but I don't know if this is a guy that just is constantly making music like some people, or takes, I mean, this album took 2 years, so, and it's his first album. I don't know if, you know, if he got better or faster, or is happy to take his time, but I really enjoyed it. So it's a thumbs up, and it's my pick of the week for sure.